Hi, good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to all our eminent panelists, architects, lighting experts, design professionals, and friends from facility management fraternity. It's indeed a pleasure for us to hold the second edition of our webinar series called Business in the Time of COVID, Breaking Down Solutions for Workplaces. Our last webinar, where we discussed solutions for restaurants, we had some great insights from our panelists, echoing a radical change which was required to make F&B outlets accessible, trustworthy, and ready for a relaunch. With the help of design innovation-centric changes, one can fight the challenge at hand and keep it more flexible. We are hoping to add similar such initiatives in future. Looking at fantastic response of the last webinar and today's, we have about overwhelming number of about 140 participants today at the webinar. Physio Mezzo is honored to have our expert speakers from diverse sectors of design, engineering, architecture, lighting experts, information technology to have joined us today. Last few months have represented a mass experiment in remote working worldwide. We have seen surge in video calls, webinars, video audio calls, online presentations, and conference calls. But with COVID-19 infection curves already starting to flatten across many countries, a talk of reopening offices in a bid to kickstart ailing economies is already in the air. In this light, there is an eminent attention and correlation between employee wellness, safety, productivity, talent, engagement in the workplace. The idea of health and wellness is now expanding. While access to natural light, air, and movement is key to wellness, is an almost standard practice in many work environments already. We believe that with new technology, touchless solutions, materials, products, protocols, and air filtration systems may begin to mimic what we used to associate with traditional healthcare environments. Without wasting a moment here, I would like you all to introduce you to all our speakers for the discussion today. Our panelist one, hi Pallav. I would like to welcome Pallav Saxena. Pallav is head of projects at OYO Workspaces. With 18 years of experience in the field of construction and project management, Pallav is currently heading transformation for workspaces at OYO and leading the end-to-end design to delivery projects of 3 brands: Innovate, Power Station, and Workflow. He has successfully created and rolled out products of Workflow, leading to development of nearly 20,000 seats across various cities in India within 15 months. Prior to OYO, he has also worked as project and construction management specialist with likes of JLL, L&T, Shapoorji, and Lotus Greens. I would also like to welcome Jaspreet Chando. Hi, Jaspreet.
Hi.
Lighting expert and partner at Ethereal Designs. Jaspreet is an architect by background and lighting designer by self-study and practice over 18 years. As partner of Ethereal Designs, she has done architectural lighting design for varied projects, ranging from airports, urban landmarks, convention centers, hospitality, offices, residential retail, and more. Her lighting design work has been published internationally. She has also worked as visiting faculty at various architecture colleges as well. Very happy to have Mr. Sanjeev Seer. Hi, Sanjeev. Sanjeev is HVAC and solution expert. He's a senior management solution at Swegon Blue Box India, Middle East, and SAARC. Sanjeev's focus at Swegon over the years has been on ventilation requirements for buildings. He's an expert in chilled beam solutions and has an in-depth knowledge and experience in building cooling systems. His years of experience include various building HVAC system designs, IAQ, and data centers. Panelist 4, we also have here Mr. Mayank Yadav. Hi, Mayank.
Hi everyone.
Mayank is looking after project sales for Asian Paints, BAT division for Delhi and NCR region. He has been with Asian Paints for over the last 2 years and has previously worked as ASM for states of Delhi, UP, Uttarakhand, and Rajasthan, working on network expansion, influencer-driven growth for BAT category. He is an alumnus of IIM Kozhikode and has previously worked with Philips and Deloitte. Then there is Divya Diwan. She is head of marketing and communication at Veris. Hi, Divya.
Hi.
Having begun her career in strategy consulting for Fortune 500 pharmaceutical brands, Divya has knack of choosing arenas of deliberate discomfort. She entered the booming yet highly unfamiliar B2B SaaS space with Veris, a high-growth office automation startup. As a part of core team as well, she has led North and West India region in sales. Presently, she leads marketing and communications, laying solid foundations for thought leadership at Veris. Moving along, I would also like you to meet my friend and my colleague, Niranjan. Hi, Niranjan.
Hi.
Niranjan is an architect from SPA. She is a team lead in building materials for Studio Mezzo. Niranjan has delved into deeper study and suggested some extremely pertinent design interventions for workspaces. Niranjan will also be co-moderating session along with me. And before we move on, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Kajal. I'm founder at Studio Mezzo. I'm a graduate of National Institute of Design, Ahmedabad, specializing in museum and communication design. With over 16 years of experience in design, I have worked in various verticals ranging from offices, restaurants, cinemas, retail, museums, and experience centers. I've had pleasure of working with prestigious clients like Punjab National Bank, PVR Cinemas, Haldiram, Future Group, and Co-Office. To set the platform and give a basic hypothesis of this discussion, I would like to request Niranjan to share a short presentation for everyone to see. Niranjan, can you share your screen, please?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Considering the gravity of the present situation, it seems that COVID-19 is here to stay for quite a while. Keeping that in mind, it is imperative to plan and modify our workplaces as we move towards the new normal. We should be well equipped to curb the spread of coronavirus while maintaining the work collaboration, interaction, and productivity. To begin with, WHO released a set of guidelines earlier in March highlighting certain workplace precautions such as the preparedness plan and its elements, the response plan, enhanced cleaning protocols, posters and guidelines, showing good hygiene practices, ensuring social distancing and communication with your employees. It is also important to know the outcomes of modifying your workplace. These include making your office a safer space while COVID-19 is still at large, setting an example in the industry by adapting as per the present requirements, gaining the confidence of employees and stakeholders. Now, interventions are required in each and every space in function of the workflow pattern. These spaces majorly include the entrance area, the lift lobby and the elevator, the waiting area, common areas such as meeting rooms, pantries, and the lounge, workstations and cabins, washrooms, isolation room, and other service areas. These interventions required for the spaces can be categorized under 6 major aspects, namely layout and design, lighting, IT integration, HVAC, touch-free interventions, and disinfection. Now, keeping in mind the guidelines, the workflow pattern, and these aspects, in the next part of the presentation, I will briefly describe each of these aspects and the possible solutions thereafter. Starting with layout and design, areas which can be easily crowded are the most vulnerable. These include, firstly, collaborative spaces such as entrance and waiting areas, open workstations, meeting rooms, pantries, and secondly, confined spaces such as washrooms, lifts, and lift lobbies. Studio Mezzo offerings and solutions include design of signage, decals to ensure social distancing, and COVID-19 guideline manuals, design and installation of new structures such as the isolation rooms and visitor meeting pods. These meeting pods will limit the outsiders to the reception area of the building. Reworking the office layout to segregate open workstations and collaboration areas, integration of partitions to existing spaces, and design of meeting spaces in the existing unused semi-open or open areas. Lighting. Major points that can be considered are first, daylight integration. It is well known that spaces with increased exposure to sunlight have fewer viable bacteria. It's always hygienic to let workplaces interact with natural elements like this, as it has various benefits other than possible disinfection. Secondly, the possible contamination of frequently touched surfaces, such as switchboards, needs to be addressed as well. Solutions include integration of app-based and voice-controlled smart switches, integration of occupancy or daylight sensing automated lighting, integration of UVC lamps for disinfection, of course, in the absence of any human in the space. Moving on to IT integration, firstly, employee and visitor management needs to reduce human interaction and go contactless. Second aspect is that of a virtual workspace to assist with bringing in the new normal. Solutions here include integration of visitor employee management softwares, which are app-based and remotely operated, thermal screening and questionnaire-based kiosks, integration of cloud-based work environment and tools. Now we know that no study has ruled out the possibility of coronavirus being spread via the airborne route. In fact, there have been cases that actually point towards this possibility. Therefore, air conditioning and ventilation become important interventions for the post-lockdown workplace. There is also a need to take into consideration the aspects of relative humidity, temperature, and external airflow. Solutions include increasing the fresh air intake, flushing out air using exhaust systems and fresh air intake at least once a day, integration of air purifiers and filters. Making the workplace touch-free. It's needed because of vulnerable elements in spaces such as washrooms, which are culpable as super spreaders of COVID-19. Wash basins with touch-based taps and soap dispensers are equally vulnerable. Sanitizer dispensers and door handles are amongst other surfaces which could be contaminated. However, as an exception, it is not recommended to use touch-free air drying technique because studies have shown viral contamination to be higher in this case than using paper towels. Studio Meso offerings and solutions here include sensor-based sanitary ware such as faucets and soap dispensers, foot-operated or automatic door openers and sanitizer dispensers, design of social distancing decals, guidelines, and floor-to-ceiling partitions in confined spaces. Lastly, disinfection of vulnerable elements such as the internal space and surfaces, bags, belongings, and vehicles is extremely important to be done on a daily basis. Solutions here can be transport and human disinfectant tunnels, UV chambers for disinfecting belongings. We also recommend daily or weekly disinfection of space and surfaces. We hope to create a safer workplace in the future with response to the pandemic as well as some long-term goals. Over to you, Kajal.
Thank you, Niranjan, for the presentation. Moving on, it's very important that, surely crisis and uncertainty are catalyst for creativity and innovation, which is flexible and agile. There are clearly multiple ways to achieve this. Building trust in employees, service staff, preparing workplaces, strong communication strategy, smart interior solutions, and using lighting intelligence. Integration of HVAC and backward integration of services. These are probably very, very important. And at Studio Meso feel that even if we do certain things which are flexible and agile at this stage, it can actually achieve to fight any crisis or any pandemic of such nature. I would like to put out a scenario to all by saying that, Scott Brimbaum, the most creative ideas aren't going to come while sitting in front of your monitors. He said that when he was unveiling the plans of Samsung's new US headquarters, saying it's really designed to spark not just collaboration, but that innovation you see when people collide. Vast outdoor areas sandwiched between floors will lure workers into public spaces, where Samsung's executives hope that engineers and salespeople will actually mingle. World over, search workspaces, which have been precedent like Google, Facebook, and even Yahoo corporate offices, are designed around interaction in cubicle, brainstorming in conference rooms, discussion in hallway, and decision in cafeterias. Yet COVID-19 is set to change how design of workplaces is to be approached in days to come. I would like to ask Pallav, what are your views on change of design approach in workplaces today?
So if you look at the evolution of design in the offices, what has happened is it has happened through a series of events, be it MNCs coming to India, be it design being governed by foreign architects, and also a lot of people who had worked outside, and the decision makers sitting outside India as well. So there has been past events which has changed the way the offices are designed, and COVID is also one of the events which is changing the way offices are designed. See, what we see is that first thing that starts changing is the basic habit of people in these kind of event. Then the changes turn to a lifestyle kind of a changing event, and then it becomes a culture changing event.
Right.
So you realize that some of these events reach to a stage where they start influencing how the culture of an organization starts changing. This might be through the areas getting designed for brainstorming and other things. These were not available earlier. So these things have happened, and these, as of now, this COVID situation is still going on. So we actually don't know how long this will go on, and what kind of changes it will create. But definitely, we anticipate a lot of lifestyle and culture changing events that will happen, and this would involve in terms of how do you now brainstorm? Would you brainstorm more virtually? Would you actually go touch free, and you will stop shaking hands, or you will stop touching switchboards? Would you still be very finicky about how things are around you, in terms of would you still not want to share the air which you are breathing in within your particular zone? So these are the kind of evolution that we might see in terms of how the design will pan out.
Right. So does that mean that the concept of traditional offices, like the formats of cubicles, are all set to make a comeback? Like with co-working spaces and hot desking being the norm at new workplaces, is it set to see any sort of transformation, Pallav?
See, this transformation is dependent. It's not just one factor which is at play. There are larger economic factors also at play, and the reason where we are here because there are certain benefits of the way we have been operating it till now, and those benefits would continue to be there. The question is how these spaces will transform. So yes, there might be a bit of resistance, a lot of resistance to sharing spaces at the start, in terms of at least sharing my own space or my own workstation. And over the period of time, we might see the changes consolidating in terms of how back we go. But I don't anticipate at this stage that we might go back to the traditional. We might go a little different from there. We might get into a cluster-based approach where things might get designed into a clusters where there is certain level of control or certain level of clusterization or a certain level of isolation that can be done within a particular team or a particular client. So that is possible. But going back to a complete traditional might not be the correct answer to this question.
Answer to it. Right. Definitely, Pallav. Also, having said that, we've seen already a huge surge of, video conferencing and, virtual workspaces making a comeback. Well, traditional offices may not come back. Divya, I would like to ask you, now that people are familiar with video conferencing, what could be the future of virtual workspace? Can we expect AR or VR based solutions to be incorporated?
Yes, Kajal. So definitely I feel like virtual reality and augmented reality both will play a big role in virtual work from home moving forward. And I think the first thing we need to ask ourselves, I think each of us sitting here has either done a Blue Jeans meeting or a conference or a Zoom meeting over the past 2 months. It's almost become a norm, right?
Yeah.
And while we're used to Zoom breakout rooms and Slack communities and instant messaging, we
Right.
are also all going through our own sets of challenges with this form of model of working. So I was actually going through a report. It's called the State of Remote Work Report 2020. It's published by an organization called Buffer. And they basically just asked one key question to respondents saying, what are the key struggles you are facing in work from home or the virtual work from home scenario?
Right.
And there was actually a tie for the top spot. So there were two struggles that were key. One was collaboration and communication, where they said, yes, we are collaborating on Zoom. I mean, now we can do it even at night time, which we couldn't in office, and we can, do it according to our own zones, because I'm a night person, someone's a morning person.
Right.
But it's not the same as brainstorming on a whiteboard together in a single room, and when you are in the midst of energy, right? The second thing was loneliness was actually a major component that has been cutting into the productivity of employees, which HR departments are getting more and more worried about, right? Because you can put out Zoom meetings and event planners, but if people are feeling lonely and their mental health is getting affected, that is bound to eat into your productivity, which ultimately affects the bottom line of the organization. So this is where, according to me, AR and VR will come in, and that's why I say they are important, because there are three common points or themes that AR and VR bring into the fore. That is, if you think about it, AR and VR are the technologies which bring a desert safari into your living room, right? These are those technologies. You put a visual headset and you're suddenly in a different environment, right? The entire physical world outside is shut off. That's one. That's visualization. Second is annotation. I can make notes in the air. I can scribble on a virtual whiteboard, right?
Correct.
And the third one is storytelling, that I can actually make scenarios come alive. So I feel like there are three key uses enterprises worldwide are looking at. The first key use case, I would say, is that of bringing the work environment into your own homes. That's the first. That's the first thing. And here organizations like I was telling you the other day as well, Spatial.io are doing some brilliant work where you can actually, so if Kajal and I have to work together, I can, we can create 3D mascots of one another. And actually, I can put on a VR headset. I can have a water cooler conversation with you. I can brainstorm with you. I can make notes virtually while sitting right now at my table from my study room. That's the first thing. That's for communication and collaboration. The second thing here, I would say, is technical consulting. Here, Microsoft is doing brilliant work. They've launched an offering called the Microsoft Dynamic Remote Assist, which basically what it does is it helps technical consultants come on board with you on the visual headset and almost point out to you what to do and how. Whether it's an SAP consultant helping me with my CRM, or whether it's a person who's helping me with IT systems integration, right? So that's the second key use case, which is technical consulting. And the last one I would like to mention, which is my personal favorite, is virtual training rooms. Because I've been onboarding a lot of new joinees over the past, because marketing work has definitely expanded. So I've onboarded about, let's say, 3 to 5 people over the last month. And their trainings are absolutely disengaging through Zoom, It's just not the same. People, you can almost see them snoozing off on the other side of the screen. And so I think here as well, VR is going to play a very important role, which is to almost simulate boardrooms. So my sales people at Veris, they sell to Fortune 500 companies. I can easily simulate a boardroom of a Pfizer or a Bain & Company and have IT heads and digital transformation heads seated there and speak to them in the way that they actually would. This is all possible through VR and AR. So I feel like massive gaps that AR and VR can fill, which no other technology can when it comes to virtual work from home.
Right. So Divya, you made a very valid point that while technology is expanding by leaps and bounds, and we see so many possibilities of engaging and meeting people, but then there's a human to human interaction, that face to face bond, which is kind of missing. So technology is here to stay. It's going to make some new solutions for us. So very interestingly, if I move into more deeper analysis of office spaces, very interestingly, I would like to ask Jaspreet, like how useful is technology in automated lighting systems in creating this new normal, while Divya's talking about various possibilities, avenues. When we are talking about physical office spaces, how useful are these automated lighting systems, Jaspreet?
So, of course, it's going to be very useful because, as Niranjan already pointed out, switches are, of course, the common points of touch which one wants to avoid. So, the most simple way of doing it is using sensors. I will share my screen here because I'll be talking about some of the technologies which will probably be a little new for some people, and
Great.
The visual will help people kind of relate to it better. Yeah. So yes, so as I said, first is of course sensors, which means that when a sensor is fitted onto a light, and the moment you are entering the room, it senses your presence and gives signal to the light to switch it on. Now, the same sensor can actually also detect the presence of daylight as well as a person, and then decide if there is sufficient, if there's already sufficient daylight, it wouldn't turn the light on, and the sensor itself can have that kind of a setting to determine how much amount of light is required in the space, and accordingly, operate the light. Now, this is a system which can actually be retrofitted. I mean, which can actually go into the existing spaces without having to do a lot.
Right.
And then, of course, just putting a sensor in the most basic form, but that could actually go into a full system, which is automated control. If you refer this image here, now with the help of sensors in an office space, there's usually seating which is one row of seating which could be closer to the windows, and another could be a little away, and another further deeper inside. Now the sensors would detect probably enough sunlight in the row of workstations closer to the window, and communicate that daylight level to the control system. Control system would then turn off the lights which are closest to the daylight area. Now, in this, another level that gets integrated is the lights would then be dimmable. In this system, dimmable lights would be there. So the second row of workstations, since there would be some amount of daylight received, but maybe not sufficient, the control system would dim that row of lights by a certain amount, and the lights further inside can be dimmed to a different level. So this way, integrating sensors, dimmable lights, and automated control systems, we can actually have an office space which responds both to daylight conservation, utilization of daylight, as well as human presence.
Right.
Now this whole thing gets taken to a whole different level today, where we have such easy access to internet, and we have smart systems everywhere. So from smartphones to smart TVs to smart lighting systems as well now. Now, what that would mean is that the entire lighting system can be networked in a way that the lights then kind of become a part of that whole network channel which can communicate to each other. Now, for instance, if I'm sitting in a particular space in my office, and late in the night, and the rest of the staff is not there, certainly the system could be so programmed to have the lighting level in my zone be the highest, but at the same time, it would communicate to the lights next to my zone and have them dimmed a bit slightly, and then the third zone could be dimmed further down, so that I do not sit in a zone which is bright just in my island and the rest of it being dark. So when the whole system is connected to each other, there are so many possibilities which actually add to users' convenience, and not just users' convenience, but also the stakeholders or facility managers. They have the advantage of being able to assess the people movement and the usage of space, and for instance, to find out whether a meeting room is empty and available or not, and various other things like air quality control, and integrate cameras and security system into this whole Internet of Things. And this smart system can be done using various technologies. I've listed down a few here. Yeah, the few I've listed down here are power over Ethernet, PoE, Bluetooth mesh, and later not something which is coming into use immediately, but subsequently would be Li-Fi. But briefly to tell you, power over Ethernet means that now usually a light is connected with an electrical wire. But when they are dimmable lights with automated controls, there are two sets of wires. One is an electrical wire which supplies power, and second is another set of wire which gives data transfer, or which gives data signals to the light. In PoE systems, the system is such that all the lights would be powered through data cables, the Cat5, Cat6 cables which I use for telephones. So you will have only one set of wires, and all the lights would actually be controlled over a network controller. And then the lights can have the auxiliary devices such as sensors and controllers and everything. Now this is one such system which I was saying, wherein the whole building automation gets digitalized, a wired system. And other than the wired system, there's a wireless system using Bluetooth. Now, using Bluetooth, I can connect my phone. Okay, first of all, in whatever existing light that may be there in my office, what requires to be put up is a device which will receive the radio signal, like a Bluetooth compatible device, like a Kasambi device. Once that is there, I can use my Android phone to control the light. So that connects my phone to one light. Likewise, there could be several other devices, several other mobiles, several other lights, and again, cameras, security systems, fire alarm systems. All of these can be connected over Bluetooth to make a Bluetooth mesh. And in turn, that can actually allow an entire building, to be wirelessly connected. And other than these systems, of course, what will come in the future is instead of using Wi-Fi for data transfer, subsequently at one point in time, we'll all be using Li-Fi, which is actually we'll be using light to transfer data, a visible light communication technology. This is still under development and has not been used for mass adaptation. But these are systems we can look forward to in automated lighting, intelligent lighting.
Wow. Wow. So clearly, luminaires are like mini computers, right? They're going to become almost like mini gadgets, which can actually do so many multiple functions than what we think of just lighting up the spaces, right? So
absolutely. The main thing is that since light has to be everywhere, one cannot do without a luminaire. So right. The idea is to integrate, lights into this whole system, because in any case that would be there, and a small addition to it, like a sensor or a Bluetooth device integrated to the whole building. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. I was actually part of another webinar which was organized by Signify, and how interestingly they were talking about the same and resonating the same thoughts, wherein lights have actually become like a mini computer system which actually has data, so many other functions which we go beyond illuminating spaces, and there's just so much to look for. So I think offices, once incorporate such things, can become smart offices in themselves, right? Speaking of elements of lights and integration of daylight mentioned by Jaspreet, and there are other aspects also, the aspects of ventilation and air filtration, where I would like to bring in Sanjeev and ask him to throw some light on how to approach aspects of ventilation and air quality. What do you suggest, Sanjeev, in this respect?
Before going through air conditioner system, we need to understand how specific this COVID SARS-2. There are two different actually systems. One is SARS-CoV-1, which happened 2002-2004, and right now actually SARS-2 is completely different altogether. Now coming back to only SARS-2, which is right now we are facing, the size of this particle is basically virus 80 nanometer to 160 nanometer. So these particles, this virus cannot be captured in any kind of filter except maybe very fine filter or maybe HEPA filter. So in traditional, if you see in office applications, people using mostly recirculation AC, VRF, or maybe split AC, or many other air handling unit as well. So these virus cannot be captured in normal filters. Right. So it could be very much chances that some small viruses, which will be less than 0.1 micron or 0.2 micron, can be again back to your containment areas. So the only solution is you have to more ventilation is required in that specific area. Of course, there is a norm and there is a calculation every building how much it required. Currently, it should be further high, whatever the based on requirement. Second, you have to completely, if possible, stop the recirculation AC completely. We should not be done recirculation AC at all, unless it's very mandatory. You have to run. Try to incorporate these ventilation products available from the different part you can use. Now, of course, the moment you will increase ventilation, next question sometimes comes that how energy could be increased, because your load could be increased simultaneously.
Right,
so you can
that's right.
kind of energy recovery wheel kind of products where you actually cut down the additional load. Now, of course, we understand in future probably you will not fully occupied in a building. If right now the design is 100 people, probably in future, even next 2-3 years, probably 70-80 people as can go. So you can compensate somewhere in that area. Second, if only ventilation cannot be solved in our hot and humid climate like in India, you can additionally cool through a lot of water cooling system like chill beam or radiant cooling, and nowadays become popular in India because to maintain indoor air quality. COVID probably come nowadays, but actually whoever is more focused on indoor air quality, they have already started this system from the long backs. So you can use this kind of the product further. And if someone having a fan coil unit, I'm talking about existing building.
Right.
If someone having a fan coil unit, probably they can connect with this fan coil unit, or maybe a recirculation issue, existing recirculation issue, some kind of heat pump kind of application products, where you can supply very hot water in the cooling coil, and at the time heating coil, it become a heating coil. So if you see the lot of research already you have taken, COVID-2 can be killed at the rate 60-degree temperature. If you create a 60-degree temperature with around 1 hour in your any system, so COVID can be killed. And if you maintain 37 to 40-degree temperature, it will be required 24 hours to kill the virus. So for before starting any office, if there's existing office already having this system, you can connect this system and you can increase the water, because there is no human occupancy right now in maybe before starting an office. So you can kill that way. But parallel you have to run ventilation system, and the ventilation, it is also I've seen that many times many offices whoever having ventilation system as well, they switch off the system in night. Let's say 6 or 7 p.m. when people have gone from the office.
Yes.
This system has to run 24 hours, whether there is a COVID-2 or there's no COVID-2 at all. So system has to run 24 hours. Of course, you can lower down your speed because there's no human in night. Normally, there's no occupancy at night time. You can cut down your speed or ventilation rate lower, but you have to run the system continuously.
Right.
We cannot kill a virus which we are not known yet till now. It is better to extract all the ventilation through ventilation air, so outside.
Right. So you think that obviously the COVID virus there is a solution to kill it through the ventilation systems as well. So is it applicable for commercial and interior industrial setup buildings in India as well? Like,
No. You think understand wrong. Ventilation cannot kill the system. Ventilation is job to remove any contamination in the building, whether COVID or whether any particle or any dust, whatever. Right. There's a lot of VOC, radon, lot of indoor pollutant. Actually, indoor is 10 times more pollutant than your outdoor. So ventilation job to throw the any contaminant in the building outside. Ventilation is job not to kill. Now, of course, as I told, the size is very less. COVID size or less than 0.1 micron. So whenever you go is outside, because there's a very limited chance of this in your building as well. But if there's any chance, that could be go outside, and outside, as I told, 37-40-degree temperature is well enough. If within 24 hours this virus will be anyway killed. So that's why you can maintain. There's no solution. Nobody can claim that I can kill virus too, because there's a lot of research going on at that moment. We have found a lot of they have mentioned SARS-CoV, but that's COVID-1, 2002, 2004. Now it's a COVID-2, different virus altogether.
Right.
And of course, you can create 60-degree temperature in your heating coil through your fan coil unit or maybe your air handling units. But continuous 60 degree you cannot run in the building because there's occupancy as well. It could be done for maybe 1 hour or 2 hours before the occupancy start coming. During the occupancy, during the office time, you have to run some kind of the cooling system, combination of ventilation system.
Right. Are there any air cleaners available apart from, say, a HEPA filter? Like, and do these products help? Like,
no, in industry, if I see 95% the air cleaners in the industry selling right now, they don't have HEPA at all. Now,
right.
let's say even the 5% good product which having a HEPA, but that products are very small. There is no fan and no circulation mode at all. So it could be can cater that if there's some HEPA filter integrated product is there, that can be catered maybe 100 square feet or 70 to 100 square feet basically. So that kind of product can be placed somewhere in desktop, whoever people working, or individually cleanless. So you cannot clean the entire office through that system. This is an individually personal basis. They can put maybe in desktop for their own safety. But you have to understand if you put this kind of the air cleaner as well. Let's say you're putting a HEPA and the virus captured within HEPA. Virus can be captured in HEPA filters. But when you have to throw the filter, you have to very precisely have to do. There's a lot of precaution need to clean the filters, including you have to integrate a PP and all other measurement. So it's not like I use some kind of the air cleaner, later just I throw the filter randomly. Till now people probably do these kind of things. Now onwards probably they have to take a caution because the virus can be captured in HEPA and virus will not kill in normal within the temperature environment. Indoor this can be lived even 3 to 4 days indoor conditions.
Right. So like you mentioned clearly that indoors is more polluted than outdoors. There's another confined space, which is there in offices, which is the washrooms, They are vulnerable to containment of germs. So Mayank, what are the measures which are required to make washrooms safe for use?
So Kajal, even during normal times, if we talk about, so washrooms are generally considered as a breeding ground for bacteria, viruses, and they require regular cleaning. If I were to say now we are living in a germaphobe's nightmare where the intensity has increased a lot. So so it will actually take a two-pronged approach where there will be certain regulations and guidelines which are to be put up, which are actually have been put up by Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, which requires that an organization have to undergo a 4-hour deep cleaning of the entire washroom area using a 1% sodium hypochlorite solution, leaving it for 1 minute for the on the entire surface. And every 2 hours, they have to clean the touch points which are regularly touched, like say the taps, the flushing points, and even the doorknob handles. That needs to be cleaned every 2 hours. So these regulatory or guidelines measures will have to be incorporated by the organizations to ensure the safety for their employees. And the second prong will be the behavioral change, which needs to be incorporated in the individual, where we have to ensure that the proper use of washroom utilities is being done. The flushing is done after every use, and the lid is being closed after every use before flushing, so that the plumes do not spread out during the flushing part. And again, like you can convert the basic amenities which are currently there by using certain adapters which can convert your touch points to touch-free taps and sensors, and then you can utilize foot-operated valves. You can convert the current doors which required a door knob or a handle to a touch-free door by using a two-way element or maybe a foot-operated element. So these two-way approach will have to be incorporated, where one will be strictly followed by the organization and one which will be a behavioral change from an employee point of view.
Right. No, very interesting, Mayank, because behavioral change is something which is actually can, be implemented with the basic, guidelines which can be given to staff, how you put signage and wayfinding. Interestingly, the Kerala government did not treat COVID pandemic primarily as a medical challenge. They rather treated as a social behavior problem, like you rightly mentioned, by doing so, Kerala has shown the difference that effective human behavior management can make a health crisis, go away. The inability of behavioral science to play a significant role in management of this pandemic should likewise serve as a wake-up call for the world. It should set off a search for a fundamental and multidisciplinary approach to understanding human behavior in all its complexity. Workplaces where most of us, spend better part of our day or rather better part of our lives, earlier used to have that purpose of, putting out maximum output. Whereas today, modern offices have become tool of acquisition, collaboration, retention of best talent in the highly competitive industry. Because of this, workplaces such as, offices, co-offices, even warehousing buildings are often designed with emphasis on choreographing or directing the movement of occupants, right from the zones catering to visitors or external services like the entrance or waiting lounge, reception zones or meeting zones, etc. Specific common areas are to be occupied by office staff, like, even the cafeterias or conference room, or in case of co-work, a huddle zone or a brainstorming one. And finally, independent workstations, cubicles, pantries, and, housekeeping staff's room, things like that. So, Pallav, my, question goes to you. How can we ensure, safety of visitors and staff, keeping in mind these differentiated zones which exist?
All right. So visitors, as far as visitors is concerned, I think for a good period of time, visitors are not going to come to office, or people visiting to other offices is going to be, very restricted.
Yeah.
I think technology will have to replace that. The first round of discussions would, typically be on virtual platform, and the visitors would not be very frequent. When it comes to the staff, they would visit, they would come to office, they would interact with people who are directly there, some of their colleagues. They will also go on the virtual platforms, as we have been discussing. What we also see is that all these collaboration areas would need to, for the time being, need to become more compliant to this distancing norm. So yes, there's a need to review the spaces that we have, and make them compliant by keeping certain distancing norms in position, reduce out some of the loose furniture which was there, and make those spaces compliant to the requirement. So those things will change, but again, whether this change would be a very permanent change, or would it continue to remain there, or things will come back to normal. It depends on how things pan out further from here.
Right.
So as far as the coming few months are concerned, I think there's a lot of emphasis in terms of technology for meeting out and speaking to visitors needs to go through a lot of technology platforms, like going on virtual meetings, and even if the visitors coming in, there needs to be the layers of screening to ensure that there's safety being ensured for the employees.
Right. Interestingly, OYO spaces, or, the very concept of co-work enables flexibility. It makes sure that you can actually customize solutions as per your, client's requirement. So that can enable so many things which can actually work in favor of people opting for co-work spaces. What are your thoughts on this, Pallav?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that's one benefit that co-working industry is already providing to the clients.
Yes.
The ability to flexible to adapt to changing needs is something that's the highest for the co-working industry as of now. So it's easier for us to bring in elements and modify the situations immediately. So most of our co-working centers, we have already transformed them to make the common area compliant already. And speaking to our clients, we can provide them the solutions which they are looking for. So it depends upon what the client's needs are. We can provide them virtual meeting rooms. We can provide for those facilities. We can provide segregation of air conditioning if they require any specific touch-free surfaces for lighting and other solutions. We can customize these solutions for them. So we will try to bring in all these products in terms of technology platform, and offer them to our clients, that if you need certain space to get modified, if you need to become more compliant to COVID, if you want to become more compliant to COVID, we will be happy to help them. And be it a small office requirement or be it a larger office requirement, it's easier for us to actually provide that kind of a solution.
Right. So actually, office as a concept has transformed from being just a space to a service, really, where one can actually, adopt or adapt itself to the current responsiveness or requirement of the hour, whether it is pandemic or any other problem which may, arise in future. I think it's adaptable to certain, solutions. And moving ahead, corporate work offices will become more need basis or service basis, and can adapt itself to whether it is visitor management or providing the the concept of 6 feet offices. I think it can easily adapt itself to that. While we are talking about technological interventions and, most of it is moving on to IT. Divya, how are these technological interventions automating, employee and visitor management and making them contactless, and what is their impact on business relationships now?
So Kajal, I think we can answer 3 big questions here. Question number 1, and I think that was something Mayank and Pallav were also sharing about, it's so important to look at compliance or regulation because that becomes your minimum requirement to ensure your pandemic proof in your office. So I think the first thing that facility management heads or admin heads, what's really keeping them up at night is what are the key compliances according to the Ministry of Health, according to Ministry of MSMEs, the WHO, what are they saying are required for an organization to do to pandemic proof when it comes to the insider, which is your employee, the outsider, which is your visitor, right? That's the first question. The second is, how is the office automation space introducing radical innovations to solve for these challenges? And like you said, agility here is key so that you can solve for this now. And if tomorrow there is a second wave coming in, how will you again become agile or go back to the way that things were earlier? So that's the second point. What are the radical innovations we have for VMS or for the employee attendance space? The third question, like you mentioned, was what is the impact on business relationships? So I think let's go one by one and I'll quickly take you through these. The first question being, what are the key compliances? So there are 3. Number 1 is reducing touch points, as Pallav was also sharing, because obviously you want to ensure that you are reducing anybody's interface with an infected surface. And further, that person could also infect many others through that one surface. So University of North Carolina did a study in March which said that the coronavirus can stay on a surface and keep a surface infected not for hours but up to 5 days. Wow. And the scary situation here, when we paint out a quick scenario, because I want you to understand the panic with which our clients, whether it's a Fortune 500 company or an MSME come to us with. And that is as follows. So let's say there's a Fortune 500 enterprise out of Gurgaon, DLF Cyber City. They have about 1,000 employees. They've decided to do a 30% occupancy, which means 300 people coming into the office on a rotational basis. Right. Each of these employees on a daily basis touch 40 surfaces. Each of these 40 surfaces can keep the coronavirus active for 5 days. So now you imagine and amplify the situation in your head from a 300 into a 40 surfaces into 5 days for one surface per employee. It suddenly becomes a breeding ground for a pandemic to spread, right? Like wildfire. So I think that's the first thing, which is reducing touch points by minimum 60 to 70%. Because if you think about it, an employee will always touch the attendance system because he has to pass through that, and a visitor will always touch the visitor management system. He or she has to pass through that. The second is screening, as Pallav was sharing, to protect the environment. At least ensuring that we only allow asymptomatic individuals inside. Whether it's an employee or a visitor, you want to make sure they do not have a temperature which is beyond a permissible limit. And they're always wearing a facial mask. The third and the last one here would be, and which I feel like a lot of organizations overlook this, and that's something that we keep reminding them, which is authentication, tracing, and tracking. Tomorrow, if there is a COVID positive case inside your organization, it could have come from a visitor outside who has entered your organization the day before or a week before, which means you should be in a position to at all points trace and track even visitor contacts and authenticate their phone numbers, right, when they enter an organization. So these are the 3 compliances, which is reducing touch points, screening, and finally being to authenticating, tracing, and tracking. So now we'll go to what are the radical innovations that the office automation space has created for organizations worldwide, which are being adopted by hundreds of organizations as we speak. And so I'm just going to share my screen quickly and share these innovations. Okay? Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay. So the first technology I'd like to talk about would be for employees. So we'll quickly divide it into two parts. One is for the insider and then is for the outsider. So for the insider, the most radical innovation, which is extremely exciting across the office automation space, is the 3-in-1 attendance, screening and access system. So what this essentially does, if you see this device, is three things. One, first things first, let's say Kajal enters her workplace. The first thing that's important is to authenticate that she is an employee at that office. So through facial recognition and by capturing and verifying her facial coordinates, she is authenticated as an employee or as a stranger. That's the first check. The second check here is through an infrared camera, which checks your temperature, body temperature, and ensures that it is not beyond a permissible limit. In case it is beyond a permissible limit, then there will be an LED light sound, here, which will be reflected as red, and there will also be an alarm sounded, as well as your security teams being immediately notified that there is an employee who requires attention and could be danger to the rest of the office. The final check is your mask screening, which is according to the WHO guidelines. And so we use AI-based sensors to check if the person is wearing the mask or not. So this is the 3-in-1 attendance system. And how this works essentially is Kajal walks in, and this can in fact also be integrated with your access control. So if we've seen turnstiles placed at DLR Cyber City or One Horizon Center, this device can actually be placed right on top of it. Kajal enters, she shows her face, she gets facial recognition based scan and is verified. Then her mask is checked, her temperature is checked, all is good. So the access control automatically opens up. So she doesn't need to tap her RFID, doesn't need to tap her phone. She simply enters inside the organization. And in case any of these are not verified, she will then be denied access. So that's the first technology which is quite radical in this space and being adopted by many organizations, including RBS, Barclays, etc. Now we have the second one, because there were organizations who said, I want my guard, because in India we have this, the whole point of view of there will always be a guard no matter what. Even if I completely go touchless, there will be a security guard standing there to make sure my processes are going on fine. And here we have a system where while your guard can check through his thermal gun your temperature and can check if someone's wearing a mask or not, here we have an iPad which simply facially recognizes whether you're an employee or not and marks your attendance. Right. Now you would ask yourself, that, okay, but for a tablet like this, it's very obvious that I need to touch the tablet to say check in at least, and then go ahead and have my face scanned, which means, again, there is a major danger of touching a shared surface. So here we have actually used voice recognition, which is you say check in, and the tablet will immediately go on, or the software will immediately go on to the screen of facial recognition. It will recognize that, oh, this is Kajal, this is her verification of the database. And finally, it is going to again integrate with your access controls, lift systems, any other building management systems, and allow you inside. So these are the two technologies that are being radically tested currently as we speak across the PAR when we talk about employee attendance. And they frankly ensure that it's touchless, that your attendance is marked under minutes. You're also screened for mask adherence, and you're also screened for body temperature. So that's something that is being done in the employee attendance space. I will now end with the visitor management space, which is the biggest worry here. So, I remember, Kajal, you were sharing that you've used Veris, and I think many people have used Veris at DLR Cyber City. They have right? So they have about 10,000 unique visitors a day. So their chance is that most people have at some point used it. And if you remember, you have to, again, use a shared iPad, right? And touch the check-in button when you go on. Then you have to fill in your details like Kajal Jain. Then you have to input an OTP that comes on your phone. And basically, you're using the iPad as a method to check in into the organization. The same thing today will be a massive hazard. So I would probably say no at the reception if somebody asked me to use an iPad someone else used before, because that can, of course, cause major pandemic panic. So what we did here was we created, and this is not something Veris alone has done, many organizations have done this now, we created virtual visitor lobbies. So what we've really done is we've made this a touchless process where Kajal walks in, there is a dynamic QR code being shown on the iPad. She takes out her smartphone, scans this QR code, immediately gets redirected to a virtual check-in lobby where she can fill any details she likes, such as her name, number, OTP, as well as a quick declaration form. And finally, she gets an e-badge on her phone, which can be used to check in even through the access control systems, which can be then integrated. So this, I would say, are the key technologies that I would like to highlight here, when talking about systems that we are using for visitor management and employee management. Of course, we also have an advanced COVID screening module, which we will, I think, eventually come to in the sessions later. So I will leave that for that. But these three are the key that we're solving for here, being touchless, being screening, as well as finally authenticating, tracing, and tracking. The last question I would like to answer here would be the impact on business relationships. So I will just unshare my screen here. So yeah, I think the last question I'd like to answer here is the impact on business relationships, and in that scenario, actually, I'd like to bring in even Studio Miso here, and because they bring the design element to organizations and many other design firms. Because as a tech company, I think our focus for the longest time has been to build functionality. We are the experts at use cases. We don't look beyond that to really understand, okay, how is the human being interacting with my technology? And I think that's something we really have to remind ourselves now with COVID happening, because I was the other day doing testing on our software at DLF Cybercity. And I saw the kind of panic in the visitors' eyes, right? When they're entering, or even employees. It's not normal to expect and act like technology will itself assure people. They are extremely scared through this process at the moment. So I think that's somewhere where we are really now taking help, really expressing our vulnerability and saying, we don't know this part, please help us, and please step in and help us decide how, design and tech can come together to be a nudge to people in ensuring that they feel assured and confident through this process and really help them here. Yeah.
Right. No, very well pointed out, Divya here, because absolutely what we are here talking about is integration of services. We are not talking about one independent service to make a change. We are talking about, individual, expertise in an office environment to come together and then interface it with human behavior. And also, making it simpler and, removing that fear of technology from their mind, because this is something which, it's not natural. It's not something which we are used to doing on a daily basis, but we are having to do so. And, we are having to change ourselves to, adapt ourselves to, so to speak, new normal, wherein, we are, interfacing with so many technologies and things like that. But then what is very interesting is, the luminaires, the lighting, which is seamless and which is there. Jaspreet, you've already mentioned about how natural light can be detected by, technology-oriented luminaires, and they can enable smart lighting in system. Now, how can one, adapt it to existing offices and, differentiate it from various zones, whether it is service zones or visitor zone or cubicle zones? What are your views on those?
Well, okay, let me address, there are several factors, which will come into answering your question. One is, let me share my screen. There's something called as circadian rhythm. Every living organism has a circadian rhythm, which means there are a set of things that happen in our body as the day breaks, and a set of things that happen in our body when the sun sets. So every organism has a connection with the daylight cycle, and so also we human beings. And that is called a circadian rhythm. To explain about circadian rhythm, this is a concept which has been existing ever since. It's not really new. But now, I think when we talk about the new normal, circadian-friendly lighting is something which has to be more and more ensured, that it's more and more implemented. What that means. So the fact that we sleep at night and we are up and active during the day is not just because there's light which helps us see, but it's also because that light which enters through our eye actually stimulates the pineal gland and secretes a particular hormone, which is serotonin. That serotonin hormone is responsible to keep us active, keep our energy levels high, and keep us awake, which is why during the day we are active. And as the day, as the sun sets, and by the time it is night, the serotonin hormone gets suppressed, and in the darkness there's a opposite hormone called melatonin, which starts getting secreted in the body. This induces sleep. This helps us relax, and it induces sleep. So basically, light is the main regulator of a circadian rhythm. Now to tap this, what we can understand is our body is naturally tuned to gradually, wake up in the morning when the daylight is red in color, and then, during the day, the energy levels get higher when the daylight is much whiter, and in the evening again, it is during the sunset, it is red. Which means one fundamental thing which we've been talking of for years and implementing it here and there in bits and pieces is tunable light technology. That needs to be taken more seriously now, and the regular office lighting shouldn't be just a white light. When we say white light, a white light actually can be from warm white to intermediate to cool white, and within one, because of LEDs being a very versatile kind of a light source, within one light source we can have those various shades of white fitted in, and it can be programmed such that when you come into the office in the morning, there are warmer lights, and as you get closer to the midday, the lights become much cooler, keeping you more active and energetic. And by the time evening sets in, once again the lights get tuned down to a warmer shade, which is how nature intends you to be. Now, this whole thing of circadian friendly lighting, though your question is talking about technology, why I'm talking about this is since we have tunability as an option in lighting, and since we're talking about more and more automation and tunability will very well blend in together. This is one thing which I see getting implemented more and more now, because for instance, just like how global warming some years ago or even recently, a lot of people thought that global warming was just a concept. And when people used to say that if the world ever dies, it will not be due to World War, but due to virus, people really thought it was a concept which will come up, somewhere in another generation, not ours. But now we get to face the reality that you never know it could come, something of that sort could come in our generation. We never expect to have to be facing this. So what I mean to say is there are things which we have been aware, and we've just been kind of taking it lightly. These are the things to be implemented now, because there are several factors. Just like global warming, actually light also has a factor of hazard to it. Now, we know that white light is actually a composition of the spectrum of violet, ivory, blue, green. Yeah. So every source of white light you see has a different spectral composition. Some of it might have more content of blue, some might have more content of red. The daylight that we see, so is this whole part which I've marked as an outline here is the screen is being shared, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So daylight, which changes its color during sunrise from a very warm color to a very clear white during midday, and sometimes during an overcast day, a very bluish one. This whole range is what we relate to as white light in LEDs.
Yeah.
And the more yellower ones are called as warm white, and the more bluer ones are called as cool white, and then there's intermediate. Now, if we look at natural daylight spectrum, the first image that you see on the left is that of late evening, when the daylight actually hardly has any blue content. And during the sunrise, you see a lot of red content, less of blue. And during midday, there's a whole lot of blue content. Now, this blue light is what triggers the serotonin the most. In the previous slide, we were talking about circadian rhythm. That light actually releases certain hormones which keep us active. And in that circadian rhythm, the light which plays, the fragment of light which plays maximum role is the blue light. Right. Now, LEDs often have a very high content of the blue light in the spectrum. Now, this blue light, since it tends to trigger the serotonin or the active hormone in our brain, if we're using this LED till late in the night, we're actually keeping our brain triggered for too long and actually disturbing our circadian rhythm. Now, breaking down, these are a few diagrams to help relate technically what I mean. Now, white light spectrum, if we look at sunlight, the spectrum is something like this, right? Relatively evenly distributed over various wavelengths, various colors. Commercial LED is what you see in the image at the bottom. It has a spike in the blue light. Fluorescent has a relatively mixed spectrum. But a good quality LED, so there are good quality LEDs available in the market which are blue light safe, which means they have a control over the spike in the blue light. They balance the overall spectrum of the light that comes out, and thus being more friendly to the human rhythm. Now, this particular chart is from Toshiba LED, likewise this one is from Nichia. So basically, there's a light product, a luminaire, and then inside that there's this yellow kind of a chip, which is the LED chip itself. Now, the diagrams I'm showing or the companies I'm talking of are those companies which actually manufacture that LED chip, and how there are, any one company can release various different chips in the market. Some can have a spike in the blue, and there are few which will actually be controlled. Now, these are the very subtle factors which actually impact the cost of the LED. But yes, but these are actually very critical elements which take care of our well-being in general. And specifically, you spoke about area to area, and one cannot not mention UVC lights. You know, like use of UV rays for sanitization of maybe like I already said it earlier, in probably toilets, or I don't know, we have to explore about garbage chutes, that, you know, cleaning areas. Now, what UVC does is, if this is, I mean, this is actually a representation of an RNA molecule, the RNA of a virus. When you subject it to UVC light, it's actually kind of its formation, the base in it, which is, this is the black one represented here, is one of the bases of the RNA, thymine, that, you know, that combines together and it breaks the basic structure of the RNA. Thus, the virus becomes dysfunctional. But when we're talking of UVC light, these are carcinogenic. These can cause cancer to human beings. These can only be used in a thoroughly controlled environment. There are some new technology lights which have started coming out in the market. There's a company called Bright Green in Melbourne, which says that their regular lights, which are working as general lighting for general lighting during the day, can they would be fitted with some sensor which confirms the absence of human being, and at night, instead of giving a general white light, it can turn to a UV light mode and kind of cleanse that whole space and sanitize the whole space. Although one limitation I see in this is that this means that the cleaning cycle is every 12 hours. So throughout those 8 to 12 hours when the office is occupied, you are still subject to some risk. Then there's another system called as light sanitize, which is some in which they're saying that in your regular grid of downlights in an office environment, every alternate light can be replaced with something called as light sanitize. In this, other than the light source itself, around the periphery, you have a filtration system. You have a system which can draw in air from its vents and recirculate the air after purifying it. Now, it's said to use some kind of a NTDA, which is nano titanium dioxide with silver. Now, this is some kind of a filter which will, on one hand, it uses UVA light above the ceiling. On the other hand, the risk factor becomes whether the UV light becomes harmful to human beings. But when we Google up, it is realized that this NTDA is something which blocks the UV light. So that means that this kind of a system, if it tends to get successful, would be something which can operate throughout the day. You know, so it is almost like combining light and a purifier together. But of course, these are, right now we are at a stage where we don't even know how the COVID virus really functions. You know, there are things still under research. These are some products which will probably can only be considered after further verifications as time comes.
Right.
Yeah. And there are several other aspects of light. I mean, tell me if I should continue or should we break it into it?
Yeah,
all right. Then
yes.
sure. then there are very fundamental things which are key to lighting design as such. Now, when we are talking of health conscious light, earlier nobody, also it was very much known, the blue light hazard is not just new to LED, it was there during fluorescence as well. But with LED, it has become a little more critical. And with this current situation of COVID-19, I think we should further realize that these things are not matters to be ignored. If these are the things which affect our quality of life, I mean, we obviously have to ensure that the quality of light is monitored, it is controlled, it is governed. Just like how pharmaceutical companies cannot release a product into the market without testing. Now that we know and we acknowledge that light has a direct physiological impact, I think even light should have certain standards. A particular LED chip being released in the market should have certain, I would say, norms which are not just the guidelines, but norms which, just like pharmaceutical company, you really ensure what is allowed in the market and what is not. Thoroughly keep a check on that. And then of course there are various luminaire characteristics, very subtle things. Like every light has a little flicker. Our eye may not always register that, but somewhere because of that flicker, there is a background impact. Now, those are characteristics, and also glare protection. Like you don't really want to see the light directly, the source directly, because when you see the source directly, you are actually subjecting your retina of your eye to the blue wavelength. But if it is a shielded light and you're seeing it indirectly, the blue wavelength, the blue content is not directly impacting your retina. So the various characteristics of light fixtures which have been broadly understood but often neglected and ignored due to cost constraints, I think now get to become more and more, let's say, come into the forefront, and people have to acknowledge that this is an extra cost. It's not. You cannot save costs on the, if it is against your health. Then various other things like the type of drivers, understanding what kind of control gears or drivers, what kind of issues they can give, and how best to integrate that into design, and early interactions with architects so that you are able to integrate daylight in various ways. So far, what we're talking about is just the windows having sensors and incorporating daylight with the dimmable lighting system. But of course, there are systems to have skylights which are automated, skylights which can be kind of shielded, just like blinds which can be automated. Skylights can be automated. There can be various daylight integration systems integrated into architecture. So I think more and more we should, this is a time to stop postponing giving or allotting lighting a budget to this kind of a system and really getting serious about how the quality of light matters to our quality of life.
Right. Right. Thank you, Jaspreet.
Yeah, I would like to ask the next question to Sanjeev. Sanjeev, what are the recommended rates of air exchange for different types of workplaces, such as offices, shops, factories, and other such spaces? And is there a recommended maximum CO2 level as well?
Basically, you have to do calculation based on the size of your area as well number of occupancy. But at that moment, for safer side, I can say you have to give, if let's say in office application, given you had probably 50 to 60 square feet per person. Usually in India, if I see 50 to 60 square feet per person setting, in that scenario, a minimum per person 25 to 30 CFM is need to be given. And or maybe you can say 3 to 4 year changes you have to calculate in the building, whichever is higher. Means every hour probably you have to, in layman language, every hour you need to be replace your entire volume of air in the building 3 to 4 times. Maybe you can say 15 to 20 minutes, but entire volume of the air should be completely changed. So you can say 25 to 30 CFM, to it can go even 70 to 80 CFM, depend on the how much you are wanted to more cursors. Globally, if you see globally, they are recommending 50 to 70 CFM, but India is a hot and humid climate. We have to keep balance both together. So I think 25 to 50 CFM, depend on the calculation or depend on the demand, has to be go ahead. Regarding CO2 set point, again, if you see globally, all the guidelines nowadays say because nowadays a lot of IoT based system is available where you can monitor CO2. So there they clearly mention 400 ppm is the right figure you have to maintain currently. But again, at the same time, I say for Indian context, from 400 to 800 ppm or maybe 600 ppm you can follow. At least current pandemic situation. After maybe it is over, maybe you can go up to 600 to 800. Till now, 400, 600 is the right set point.
Right, right. And Sanjeev, can the virus particles still enter through the recovery wheel or something like that in ventilation?
It's a little bit, of course, there are old generation products, but does not have a much technologies there.
Right.
Still, some of the products available in practically in cheap in Indian market. So please avoid that kind of the product. If you have some of the good products internationally available, where actually if you see guideline, they are mentioned cross contamination allowed, provided your leakage should be within 2%, 1 to 2%. But of course, there is a market, many products is more than 20% cross contamination. So please avoid that kind of the product. But our products available in international market where cross contamination less than 0.4% or even 0.1%. So those products even use operation theater also. So if you available that kind of product, you can easily can be used. Second, even within the wheel, there are different technologies. Example, particularly we also offer 3 Armstrong coating. 3 Armstrong basically a very nanoparticle. Example, context to COVID as I say 80 to 160 nanometer is the size, which will be 20,000 times higher size compared to these 3 Armstrongs. So you can understand 20,000 lower size particle, nanoparticle has been given. So not a single gaseous pollutants. Forget about this any kind of virus. Lot of like sulfur, methane, nitrous oxide, and benzene. A lot of VOC actually. That whichever come as a gaseous form, that can not be also passed.
Right.
Whichever of course less than 3 Armstrong can be passed, and there is hardly water. H2 is a less than 3 Armstrong. But that is we want H2 should be passed technically.
Right. So basically,
so it will be completely safe provided you are using 3 Armstrong coating and the leakage should be less than 2%, and of course market available less than 0.5% product anyway.
Right. So clearly not only for COVID, but it is actually relevant for air cooling and ventilation systems in metros where pollution levels are really high and there are other particles which we are always struggling to filter out in closed environments, which are extremely prone to infections. Right. So it's not only the COVID part, but any other finer particle which is required to be filtered can be handled by these, right?
See, first COVID is come today and COVID maybe will vanish maybe another 3-4 years. And but there's a lot of virus and lot of bacteria already in the atmosphere. Now virus bacteria size is very low. As I said, like COVID is 80 to 160 nanometer. Like SARS COVID-1, which will happen 2002. There is size was 0.3 to 0.6 micron. Now we are talking about COVID-2 is less than 0.1 micron. This virus or bacterial, they not floating directly, they will floating through capturing some kind of particle, dust. Example, so that's the reason you can see PM 2.5 or PM 10 various measurement in the industry. So PM 10 means 10 micron, PM 2.5 means 2.5 micron in short. So if you have to put a good filter, it can clean all this 2.5 or 10 micron level easily. So that is not a big challenge. Big challenge if your this virus is less than 2.5 micron, as this kind now right now COVID-19 is 0.1 micron. Here you cannot put in normal filter, you cannot do through these systems. So we have to go it either HEPA, but HEPA does not require in normal office application, I think. And the problem is living on is virus. I'm talking about the gaseous pollutants, which will be 15 to 20,000 lower size compared to any virus. So whenever you choose any wheel technologies, you have to think that part also, because virus is much bigger size, as I told, more than 15-20,000 times. So whichever the product in the market will give this kind of the product, you should go in that. Particle is very easy. PM 2.5, PM 10 does not matter. So whenever, particularly in Delhi, I have seen many kind of projects. Delhi and of course any metro city in that sense, Mumbai even as well. They are very concerned that their outdoor pollutant become very high, and they see the PM 2.5, PM 10, and they think they are the Same, the moment they stop their ventilation, they think they are very much comfortable when they stop the ventilation, everything is fine. But it is opposite. Your indoor pollutant is 10 times more than your outdoor. Outdoor pollutant is limited to some kind of dust and some kind of the engine, your car engine or anything, which can be controlled through filter or maybe some kind of other activities. But indoor pollutant, which will come as a gaseous form pollutants like radon, lot of VOC in your, even your carpet, what kind of the computer chips you are using, your kitchen. So that you need to be throw out. For that, you need a ventilation. You have to give certain kind of ventilation in the building, and same airflow you have to throw out as well. Only supplying a fresh air will not give you a solution. You have to throw out them.
Right, right. The contaminated air out as well.
Right.
So basically, clearly, you know what Jaspreet is talking about, what Sanjeev you are talking about in terms of air ventilation systems. It's not only for the current scenario. It will make sense in longer term as well. We're not talking about short-term solution wherein COVID is, you know, a cause of concern, and that's why we are talking about certain specific solutions. But we are talking about these solutions which are probably going to make sense in today's context and also in longer term to make these, you know, spaces more friendly and more healthier for occupants to, you know, be able to function inside. It's all about the health and wellness is what we are talking about. Which kind of
question? If normal offices, you go any metro cities, at that moment maybe 90-95% office. If you go in, start measuring what is the ppm level inside, you will landing the inside, probably they will see 2000 to 3000 ppm, even sometimes more. So what we are talking about, you should maintain 400 to 600 or 600 to 800 at max, not beyond that. In that the solution, see, whoever, some of the big companies in India, they have already implemented with this kind of the product, with chill beam or radiant cooling combination. So they are actually, they in this pandemic situation actually they are completely safe. They are allowing their employee easily. Example like Infosys, Wipro, Nestle, SK, many companies. So Infosys and so many projects, all the offices. So if you already implemented from the first day initial, forget about COVID or maybe future some other things. As an employee, you should focus this from the initial days.
Right. Thank you, Sanjeev, for that detailed, you know, insight into ventilation systems and how it's so relevant to do it even in regular scenarios with people grappling with, you know, day-to-day problems of, say, pollution and debris particles coming in and making the environment more healthier. You know, I would like to bring in Mayank. Mayank, you know, what are your solutions? What is, you know, you guys have just acquired this new bath, you know, brand, and you know, the focus has been into you know, smart solutions in the washrooms as well. What are the new upcoming solutions which are making washrooms more smart, contactless, and how do they work?
So Kajal, there are a lot of products which are currently available with us and even in the market, which can be utilized to convert your washrooms either on a temporary basis or a permanent basis to a smart bathroom kind of a solution. So there are certain adapters, infrared adapters, which you can install on your pre-existing taps, but that comes with a certain restriction of a per mix size of that particular tap, which you can change and install that adapter, and that will use a simple IR technology to sense whether a person's hand has come up and will regulate the flow of the water for there. Then there are manual foot-operated valves which you can implement for your existing bathrooms, where you just divert the water flow from a normal angle valve to a foot-operated valve, which can be utilized and can be pressed to ensure that the water gets flown out from a tap. Then there are sensor-based equipments which are available as a solution for smart bathrooms, which includes there are like sensor taps, sensor-based urinals, sensor-based soap dispensers, sensor-based hand sanitizers, which can be implemented. So a lot of products are available in the Asian Paints kitty also, and from a sandware point of view, if I also talk about, so there are certain antibacterial glaze elements which are utilized to ensure that the hygiene of the bathroom remains. Certain technologies like rimless closets, which are used more and more to ensure that no bacterial growth happens on your water closet. So these kind of technologies are already in use, and there always comes a cost implication of converting your bathroom from a normal solution to a sensor-based or a smart solution. But I would say, just to give an example, like how LED lights phased out the normal incandescent bulb because the demand for them increased and the economies of scale came into picture and the cost of these elements reduced. So, similar, if we see a demand shift from a normal manual based intervention to a sensor based products, I'm sure that the cost implications also will increase and the lifetime for these kind of products, which usually is around 2 to 5 years, will also increase to a 10 years normal component, which will be there. So these kind of product can be utilized, and these are more beneficial as compared to the manual ones. And again, because the touch element is minimal in these products, so it will be more safer from that point of view.
Right, right, right. Great, Mayank. These are the products which probably people have started looking out now for, and essentially because there is a scenario where you talk about that there are existing buildings which are already designed to create, or you can say cater to certain objectives which are based on organizations vision or format. Much like large format office plates which are already retrofitted with systems, modular furnitures, etc., or boutique offices which are open plans, maybe organic sitting and specific service solutions. So I guess there are always solutions which can be adapted right when you are designing the building, or you look at it when there is building which is already there, but you need to make modifications as per your requirement. So it's great to know there are products and there are services which can be incorporated in existing systems, which can enable such changes. At the same time, these can be thought of right in the beginning when you're designing an office, right? So everything has been, about breaking barriers between teams, and but I don't think spaces will flow into each other anymore now. Spaces might not flow, but people will. Everything has been breaking down barriers between them, but I don't think spaces have anything which kind of restrict communication, right? To understand that, what might mean, look at, we have an example of a 6-foot office concept which has been implemented by Cushman and Wakefield office in Amsterdam headquarters. Here, the creation of more space was insufficient on its own. Just a fundamental, implementation of new graphic language for wayfinding and distancing the immediate how people would, utilize the extra space around. So, do you think does that, pave way for us to think of office design in new, rational, way, sustainable, and looking back to maybe traditional ways of working? So, Pallav, considering that you come from a core, hardcore office creation background, what are the modifications you are planning at OYO to, spread the curve, which would probably be, utilized in longer term as well?
See, basically, there are certain fundamental shifts that we personally think that would come into the office space design. And as we said, that some of these are lifestyle changes and some of these are culture changes. So I'll just give you a very brief example of when I say what is a habit change, what is a lifestyle change, and what is a culture change, right? So as a habit change, we have all started sanitizing our hand very frequently. As a lifestyle change, we have started carrying sanitizer with us, and as a culture change, we might not shake hands and we probably go doing others. So how deep this effect is going to be and how much it will change as a culture and how much it will change as a lifestyle becomes very important. So what you can definitely think that would happen is that the designing of offices would definitely create certain parameters like the funneling zones would get reduced, where you see the corridors are converging into each other. You would also see reduction or the modification in the way we design toilets, the modification in the way we design meeting rooms. So the meeting rooms, for an example, earlier were designed. There was a 24-seater meeting room. I don't think people will be utilizing a 24 seats in a meeting room for a very long period of time. So the meeting rooms will become virtual, facing towards the wall more rather than facing towards each other, or facing towards the TV more than facing each other. So these kind of changes would come in. So practically what we believe is that there are 6 to 7 fundamental changes that will happen. And one of those would be there will be more emphasis on creating a space for an individual. An individual do spend more time on his workstation. He would want to have his workstation secured. The design of the circulation would definitely change. The design of spaces would be more technology compliant, where you can have a virtual meeting, where you can have more video conferencing done. You would remodel the spaces where you think the people will converge, like toilets, and as I said, clusterization will become much more important. So you would want to contain people into a certain zone, and these zones would be self-sufficient in itself. They might have a smaller breakout rather than having a larger cafeteria. These might be controlled into individual air chambers. You could say that the specific air conditioning unit would be just serving that particular zone. So those kind of changes would definitely come in. To what depth of technology do we go in? It depends upon how long this this change affects it, because the longer it takes, the longer this effect of COVID and the lockdown and social distancing lasts, the deeper would be the implication of all these things. So the deeper would be the segregation, the deeper would be the 6 feet distance requirements going to be. But at this stage, I think the best thing is to look at creating solutions which are more flexible, which can be converted, which can be moved around, which could be definitely are touch free, which definitely would aid much more technology, and would definitely be able to contain things into a specific zone.
And definitely easy to execute as well, so as to make it more responsive to customers' requirements. Going to Jaspreet again, like we've all been talking about, and there has been a larger concern from the audience as well about, when we're talking about these smart lighting systems, there's so much technology which is there, whether it's automated lighting, Li-Fi, PoE, and, there's so much, intelligence which is attached to luminaire now. So what is the, the cost attached to it? And, because like we've already understood that these lighting solutions are not only for this particular solution, but they're longer solutions for a healthier lifestyle. So, people are always concerned about like, what are the cost implications to this? Does it, make sense to implement it now to reap benefits in future?
Yes, certainly. Though initially when LEDs came into the market, we were comparing it with the halogen or fluorescent, where the cost variation was sizable. But once the advantages of LEDs became, obvious to all, that everybody got comfortable in paying that cost margin, because now they realize that the running cost being low, you actually recover that cost within 2 to 3 years, or depending, on the product. However, so likewise, when we're talking about technologies like Bluetooth, now Bluetooth mesh is relatively easier to implement even for the existing systems, because each of you have a Bluetooth-enabled device, your phones, and that really does not ask for the entire lighting system to be reinstalled. It only asks for that Bluetooth Katambi radio point to be attached to your existing lighting system, and then everybody has their own control. Everybody can create their own profile and have their own preferred setting in their cabin or their environment. So that's one possibility, which is because we're talking of minimal addition of hardware. There isn't. I wouldn't say the cost is something would pinch much, considering that these are the things we need to really look at right now. Then when we're talking of the other option we spoke about, which is power over Ethernet, again, when you're doing a typical automated lighting environment in a new project, PoE is something which I don't see happening in existing projects. It's something which will happen in the new projects which get constructed now. In a typical automated lighting environment, we had two kind of wires. One is the power wire and one is the data wire. But PoE has only one single set of wires. So if you look at overall cost, it's really, I don't think somewhere it just gets balanced out, because you're saving it somewhere and maybe you're investing it somewhere, and I don't think it's a pinching cost.
Right.
Have I answered your question, or is there something?
No, definitely, Jaspreet, see, I think this is something which everybody would agree with, because what we here to discuss are not solutions which are immediate, but these are solutions which are making, lifestyle changes, making it more healthier, making it more, flexible, and also, responsive to customers, or we can say clients' requirement, and somebody who's occupying the office. So larger, concern here is the well-being of, people who are going to use these spaces. So the investment may sound a little, high in the beginning, but then also, like the solutions you talked about, that these are becoming extremely streamlined. So it can, in larger picture, become more, smart, and actually, you can say reasonable to invest in at this point. So you gain this later. It's definitely not that if you talking about COVID, you make these changes and definitely it will probably make COVID away. But then we are talking about, larger concerns of making office spaces more healthier and, more easy to have employees to come back. So I think,
and one thing where I feel the investment must increase and people will start realizing that more and more now is the quality of lights that you buy, the quality of LEDs that one buys, because LED is something which you can actually get in all price ranges, and very often a client is tempted to go for a lower price item. But now I think one can start getting more and more conscious. What are the sacrifices you make when you compromise on that?
Right. One thing I was really intrigued by was when I was reading Divya, your profile, and it says that, as a proponent of pragmatic envisioning, you often participate in Socratic, seminars about future of workspaces, debating the role of AI-based digital assistants to virtual reality development around employee wellness. So I would like to ask you, what is the future of workspaces according to you? You've talked about COVID solutions, but then are these solutions, intertwined or are going to be woven into future of workspaces as well?
So I think one thing that Kajal, even I think Jaspreet covered, and Sanjeev as well, that this is not, we're looking at it for the long haul. So if we look at even the example of the touchless visitor lobby, which is right there on your smartphone instead of being on a shared device, what you remember is that the biggest advantage we're seeing with that is that if you think about it, on an iPad, one person can check in at a time. Now I can have 100 people check in because they're doing it via a QR code and on their smart device, right? So actually what we realize, and what a lot of the clients are realizing, is that the touchless VMS is so much more, cost effective and time effective. And so they're adopting it for the longer haul. Where we are also seeing that the future of the workplace is becoming a lot more driven from cybersecurity to physical safety. That's a major change we have seen in the way clients interact with us as well. And that element is here to stay as well. That people are now, when they're creating cubicles, you talked about the 6 feet office by Cushman & Wakefield. So in fact, they're one of our channel partners. So we work closely with them in this space as well of creating the 6 feet office, and where they talk about how it's not just about sensor-based sanitizers, right? Every element of your space can be touch-free. And even your navigation and wayfinding. So I think the future of the workplace, first things first, will be about social distancing. As sad as it is, it will be about social distancing and separation, as well as sanitization, the 3 S's, right? It will be very important to keep crisis at bay when it comes to health. I think a lot of workplace design and facility management firms, even Colliers, etc., have started thinking of designing workplaces similar to even hospitals. Because if you look at it, a Fortis or a Max, the way they are designed is to ensure that pathogens or any other elements are not passed between, or airborne particles are not exchanged between, infections aren't shared between people. So I think the first thing that people are ensuring right now is a massive element of almost a hospital-based design to a workplace. And I think the second, which is the pandemic proofing, again, this will continue for a while. And Bala was sharing the other day as well. Right now, I'm thinking about surgical interventions to pandemic proof my workplace. Tomorrow, when the reality becomes a little more real to me as to how things are going to play out, will a second wave come? Will a third wave come after that? How are we going to tackle it as humanity? Then is when I start to understand what do I need for the longer term. But I think what I'm seeing in this panel as well across the organizations, including ours, is we are at the end of the day trying to build solutions which may be expensive right now, but are here to stay for the long haul. Because while people are currently worried about this scenario, nobody wants to shell out funds in a way that only survives for the next 1 year and then switches, because it's not just about money, it's also the economic element of adoption. Technology adoption itself is a massive cost in an organization. So I think that's something to see as well, and which is something I've also picked up from the panel today.
Right. And like you said that everybody is spending a lot of money in investing in these solutions which are here for a long haul and not a short term solution anyway. But there are a lot of implications on energy as well. Like Jaspreet rightly talked about saving cost. If you look at it as a long term solution, you talked about the paradigm in which it's going to exist, or maybe multiple waves coming in. Mayank, I would like to bring you in that while these smart solutions are, more reasonable for cost, how is the energy implication, specifically in case of say a smart washroom solutions? Because we're not talking about only saving cost, you're probably also talking about saving energy here. So how are these solutions making an effort to do that?
So I believe the more we move from a manual intervention to an electronic intervention, the energy implications will be more towards saving more energy, because these kind of solutions you can tweak and you can change the requirement as and when required, as compared to a manual product which is there. So for these kind of products, the energy implication, I would say, will be more in terms of how water saving it can be, because the kind of water which is utilized for every flush which you do, or for every hand wash which you do in a washroom, directly correlates to the energy implications which are being used in a building or in an organization. So there are certain green building products which are incorporated by a large number of organizations these days, which ensure that the water flow is restricted and the energy implication again is very limited in that aspect. And similarly, the sensor-based urinals which are there, you can limit the amount of water which is being utilized. So just to give you an example, for a single flush of a water closet, you are utilizing in between 6 to 10 liters of water for a single flush. And that amount of water for recycling, for reusing, will be requiring a lot of energy. So by utilizing a sensor-based or a smart product, you can reduce the amount of water which is being used by using these kind of systems. And in a way, you will be saving a lot of energy. Similarly, the sensor-based taps. So a normal sensor-based tap can work on 4 Duracells battery for a duration of 15 to 18 months. So you are just using 4 Duracell battery and you are carefree for the next 15 to 18 months. So the electrical advantage will also again be there. So in a shorter run, you might feel that the direct energy implications might look out to be big. But in a more broader aspect, you are actually looking at saving a lot of energy in terms of water and in similar terms of other aspects which are there.
Perfect, Mayank. Sanjeev, similar question to you also, considering that your field is completely different from where Mayank comes from. What are the cost and energy implication if you're talking about good ventilation systems?
For saving from the end customer point of view, I'll focus two different categories. One is clearly energy, another is the employment investment. First, start with the energy. With the implementation of good ventilation product, with a good recovery wheel system, and with combination of chill beam or radiant cooling, if you're going with this kind of the system, and again, of course, Mr. Pallav also highlighted the cluster basis system. Same for air conditioner system, you should think about demand control ventilation. Each specific area, you should put occupancy sensor and CO2 sensor. So if there's a human occupancy differ from, let's say, a conference room, sometimes 20%, sometimes 2%, or maybe cafeteria. So ventilation also can be modulated. At the same time, you should avoiding now entire air flow in the building. You are using chill beam or radiant cooling to cool your construction through water, not through air. So put together, if you calculate in Indian context, of course every city is different, but it will be saving will be 50 to 80% energy compared to a conventional system right now usually happen in India. I'm talking about, let's say, some VRF system or maybe some chill water AHU combination system. This kind of system can be saving 50 to 80% energy. So of course, from a customer point of view, end customer point of view, definitely initial cost is high, but the payback usually come out to be within 2 years.
Right.
Now, this is one part is energy I'm talking about. But trust me, energy is a very low part when as the end customer start thinking about investment for their office. for your office, their main investment was for its employees. If employee is working, then only you get output. And there are a lot of global studies. Of course, we can share with you. All the research studies have shown, these actual studies is going on in the Europe and US. Good ventilation or good indoor air quality with the combination of whatever I'm speaking, chill beam and ventilation combination, output of a employee come out to be more than 70 to 80%. Example, in a typical office environment in India, people go 5 to 6 times, maybe for smoking or maybe for cafeteria, maybe some other gossiping. But it is not because they want smoke or they want gossiping. Why? Or maybe they're uncomfortable in conference room for more than 1 or 2 hours. They start feeling sleepy because they don't get proper oxygen within the conference room or maybe within the office area. That is the reason for they need more oxygen. That is the reason they go outside.
Right.
So the moment you start giving a good indoor air quality, not only ventilation, there's many other aspects as well, but it start giving, so they start giving you more than 70 to 80% output. So our end customer final result, which for that they make this office basically, will come out to their much more than even energy saving. Energy saving anyway 50-70%. That is the one aspect. Second aspect, your employment investment. Currently, you can understand for COVID-19, your entire office will be shut down maybe 3 months now, and
Right.
maybe some more months. So how much they loss you can understand. Same time, I know some couple of office, they start immediately, unless of course there is a obligation from the government, that is a separate topic, but they are a foolproof system from the initial days itself. So they don't have any problem even with open office. If you go particularly some of the European countries, Scandinavian countries or many more, they have not shut down the entire system at all. So one is investment for employee point of view, another of course energy point of view. Both is the use saving.
Right. So clearly we've come like a full circle in trying to address, questions where, while we are talking about the need of the hour, and there are, immediate attention which is required to be taken in, in the environments which are closed spaces like office spaces. These solutions are here to stay. They are sustainable, they're more agile, they are going to be proven more cost effective and effective and energy effective as well. So, I would like to say that we are very positive that, people are definitely will be back working at offices, in near future. While remote working has proven, surprisingly effective for many, client surveys have shown that complete face-to-face interaction is something employees struggle with and extremely imperative in, some organizations. At the same time, a lot of workforces have vocalized that post-COVID-19, they will be somewhat or very concerned about illness spreading in their workplace. Resolving this friction will require that offices undergo radical adjustments, both in how they are operated and what services are provided. I would like to thank all the speakers for taking out your time from your busy schedule to be part of our webinar and share your expertise with the participants here. I'm sure participants have also gained valuable insights into what is the future of workspace is going to look like. I would like to invite Niranjan to quickly summarize key takeaways from the discussion today and also share her screen with what world over offices and new workplaces are looking like now. Niranjan, would you like to do that?
Yeah, sure. So our panelists have, painted quite a picture here of what the COVID compliant workplace would look like. So, we have heard a lot of solutions which are available in the market right now and will be effective against COVID in the existing spaces and how they can be integrated as well. So the major takeaways basically have been considering that there's a need of human to human interaction and it cannot be replaced by anything else. We are obviously not looking at going back to a traditional workspace, but a middle ground which will have a cluster based approach supported by the virtual workspace functions such as AR and VR and virtual training rooms and boardrooms. We are all of this will be supported by touchless technology of sensor-based lighting systems, the intelligent lighting systems, and other smart lighting options. And also, in addition to this, we are looking at smart solutions for washrooms where you see the entire washroom go sensor based, and then all of this will obviously be supported by focusing on the HVAC aspect of it, by increasing the ventilation like Sanjeev pointed out, so that you have the external fresh air inflow throughout the day and the internal air is being flushed out. So the second aspect that we looked at was the visitor and employee management. The topmost priority here is social distancing, which again, as pointed out by our panelists, is supported by the flexibility in the existing systems such as CoWorks, and will be assisted by innovations which reduce touch points and incorporate contactless screening practices into our existing entry systems, and authentication and tracing of outsiders who are entering inside. We are also looking to go into a completely virtual environment with our visitors and our visitor meetings. And in addition to this, when we talk about our visitors and employees, of course, how the human psychology works and the overall well-being also comes in as a factor, for which we understand that there are lighting systems available at present which can have an impact on that, and the ventilation, also indoor air quality, how it leads to a better productivity in the workplace comes in as well. Then lastly, as a way forward, we are looking at the workplace to be able to accommodate the habit changes, the lifestyle changes, as well as the culture changes. We are looking at redesign of existing meeting rooms, the circulation design, and as well as other spaces being more COVID compliant and more technology compliant. What we have finally realized is that we are not really looking at a temporary change here, but also looking at its scope in the long run.
Right. Thank you, Niranjan. Hoping that for all our attendees, it was a positive experience. Panelists, thank you once again. Information you all shared has opened doors to multiple possibilities. We will be very happy to reply to all your queries at hey@studiomezo.co.in. My sincere thanks to all the experts in participating with such zeal and gusto. Hoping to connect with you all soon again. Have a great day, all of you. Thank you so much, Sanjeev. Thank you, Jaspreet. Thank you, Mayank. Thank you, Divya.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Pallav, so much.
Thank you very much.